Well, folks, we got the latest balance updates for Marvel Snap. 4 cards getting changed here, and a couple of them are really big in the meta, so these might actually be impactful changes. We've just got to change to some of the most annoying locations in Marvel Snap. Well, they're going to stay the same, but you're going to see them less often. So we'll take a look at those. But kicking it off here, let's start it off with Drax. He's going from a 4-5 to a 4-6 at his baseline. But he's also losing 1 power here on his on reveal. So functionally, when you connect on the Drax, you predict it correctly. Still going to be a 4-8. But when you miss on the Drax, now he's going to be a 4-6 instead. So bringing up the floor here a little bit, bringing him in line with a lot of the other staple 4-cost cards we've seen with that 6 power, Rockslide, White Queen, Enchantress now at a 4-6 as well. So doesn't feel quite as punishing to miss on the Drax, and you still get a little bit of upside on the +2 power. Now, the comment for this card is the Guardians can create some of the most exciting gameplay in Snap with their predictive playstyle. While they've been doing better with the release of Nebula, they're still performing poorly overall at the moment. Out of all the Guardians, Drax stood out to us as the clearest buff candidate compared to other cards like Rockslide and White Queen with good stats and a guaranteed upside. Drax had below average stats for a very inconsistent upside. We're giving him a small buff by moving some of his power from his ability to his base stats to improve his baseline performance. And yeah, I mean, that is going to make Drax feel better. Ultimately, I still don't think his upside is as notable as many other 4-cost cards. A lot of them can get more power or offer more utility in some way or another. Rockslide, you know, gives more power to your Darkhawk. White Queen gives power to your Devil Dino and gets you a resource. So still feels a little light to me. You can't maybe go higher than this because then you've got like Shang-Chi problems if you push him to, you know, still gaining 3 power and starting at 4-6. So might be as much as they could do here for Drax. I mean, as a 4-cost card, there's always a chance something like this can work in a Zabu package. You just toss enough good 4-cost cards into Zabu decks, and they tend to feel pretty good to play. But now he's competing against Iron Lad. I mean, maybe the Rockslide Darkhawk package will lose some strength as we're going to see Rockslide here getting a bit of a nerf. So there's a little more room for Drax to be explored there in Zabu decks, but ultimately, I still don't think this makes the card playable or better than so many 4-cost alternatives. I just don't think he quite keeps up even at a stronger base level. And ultimately you do want to hit, and when you hit a 4-8, you know, it's solid, but it's nothing incredible or crazy. So probably a nice change. Ultimately, glad it's happened, but I don't think it changes Drax too much. So moving on here to Rockslide. Rockslide is going the other way from a 4-6 to a 4-5. The on reveal here will be staying the same. Rockslide's viability took a leap forward with the release of Darkhawk and Zabu, so it's easy to look at this nerf and assume that we're targeting Darkhawk by weakening one of his support cards. And sure, you'd be right, Darkhawk has been one of the 10 winningest cards in the game since release and featured in multiple strong decks. In fact, Rockslide often mirrors or improves upon Darkhawk's stats as they're both in the top performing Dino Hawk deck. Since Rockslide's easier to adjust, we're making this tweak with the aim of weakening that deck slightly. So this is really a target to Darkhawk. They already pushed Darkhawk down to 4-0. I guess there probably wasn't another clean change. Probably didn't want to push him into negatives. That might feel a little odd. So going at Rockslide instead here to affect that Darkhawk package. And this makes sense to me. Rockslide's actually a pretty good feeling card anyway in a lot of cases. Again, that 4-6 stat line feels like a good spot to be at. And then the rocks, even when they're not buffing Darkhawk, can still offer some pretty big utility sometimes, because there is that chance even in the final couple turns after playing Rockslide that the opponent does hit one of those rocks and miss some key value piece. So he already offered disruption utility. That Darkhawk bonus was huge. So pulling him under that base 4-6 stat line that so other mini cards get to utilize, I think that's pretty fair given how much this card does. Now, I don't think this actually weakens Darkhawk decks too much. I think they'll still be powerful. Rockslide will still be worth it. He's kind of like a 4-9 when played alongside Darkhawk, and a 4-9 is still very good, particularly when combined with that upside and utility possibility. So Rockslide still looks good, just pulled down a little. So moving on here to Enchantress, she's getting the exact same change, going from 4-6 to 4-5. Now, remember, Enchantress just got buffed from 4-4 to 4-6. I thought she was already a decent card at 4-4. She became an insanely good card at 4-6 because you weren't sacrificing stats in most cases, and you had this just fantastic counter ability, this tech card ability to deny your opponent's ongoing cards, which could be both build around stuff or just big high power threats like Darkhawks and Devil Dinos, or the build around stuff like Cerebros, Patriots, etc. And as they've written here, Enchantress has grown in popularity since our buff to her 2 weeks ago, which was expected. While we're excited about how much more she's affecting the meta, she's become one of the most played cards in the game, which is a bit over our mark. We are optimistic that a small nerf to 4/5 will put her in a good position going forward, but hey, it was fun while it lasted. And yeah, again, I think that's absolutely fair. It was just basically no cost to run Enchantress, and so many other things get ruined by her that this pulls her more in line. I think she still gets played at 4/5 for the record. She was already getting played a little bit at 4/4. So this is a good middle ground. I think a great change. Now, finally here we have a pretty notable buff, I would say. Venom is going from a 3/1 to a 3/3, which is pretty big change for a 3-cost card, right? A 2-power buff here. You know, Drax kind of got a 0/1 power buff. This is a 2-power buff on a 3-cost, which, you know, Venom has had some utility. There's been some really off-meta stuff playing Venom out there, but never really made it into even the best destroy decks. They were favoring more strong base stats with something like Deathlock, because sometimes you're destroying like -2 hood minions, and the stats being added to Venom don't really advance the game plan much. You just rather start with a 5 power of a Deathlock, or you preferred the cheaper utility of something like a Carnage, which could also scale really nicely when killing small stuff. Venom only scaled well when killing big stuff, so it made him this more kind of sneaky card that you had to run almost combos for or support through things like Deadpool or other stat scaling shenanigans, which really did limit his utility generically in destroy decks. Now, that said, I think Venom as a 3/3 probably opens up a little bit additional utility in destroy decks, because you're not punished too much from a stat standpoint. Still bad for things like the hood potentially, but you know, eating a couple 1-drops for Venom might pull him in line with something like Deathlock, while still preserving that utility in those stat scaling decks like Deadpool, or doing things with Nimrods or whatever other shenanigans you might have. He gets even better in those scenarios, but has extra utility on the low end. So that said, let's read what they said, because I haven't read this yet. Venom has been the worst destroy enabler for a while now, averaging lower power in destroy decks than his peers Deathlock and Carnage. While he's seen fringe usage in decks with Taskmaster, we haven't seen any of them really take off. We'd like to give one of Marvel's most iconic anti-heroes space to shine, so we're feeding him a hearty +2 power buff. And yeah, I think that's a really notable change. I'm excited to see if this makes some of the Deadpool shenanigan-y combo style decks better, or that like can pull any of those into meta relevance. I really doubt it, because those seem pretty far away from being good, but also curious if he does make his way into destroy packages at all instead of something like Deathlock. You might see a little bit of a shift in the early game sometimes, maybe you know, grow a big Nebula and then make those stats roll into your Venom so it's not susceptible to a Killmonger or something. Who knows, right? There's all kinds of different directions you could explore with that one. So finally here we have a change to the way locations are going to be seen as well. The bonus over the air update, location. As our library of locations increases, we'll be making ongoing adjustments to hit the sweet spot we like for dynamic games. To that end, we're reducing the appearance weights on a few of our existing locations, which means they'll show up less frequently in your games. It's unlikely you'll consciously observe these changes, but we thought you'd like to know. So Atalan, Krakoa, Lake Chiguila, Morag, Plunder Castle, Sanctum Sanctorum, and Subterranea are all going to be less common, which is pretty cool. Now, this does have some implications on cards. Things like, say, Jeff, the baby land shark, might be a little bit less powerful with some of these limiting locations like Plunder Castle, Sanctum Sanctorum. He could be good to kind of sneak a win in these sorts of things. So do keep that in mind for your cards. But ultimately, I think this is a very positive change. So many people feel really stressed about these locations, have really bad moments on these locations. I actually am kind of pro disruptive location. I obviously have had some frustrating moments with these, like everybody, but I do think the ones that particularly lock out the board, like Sanctum Sanctorum, I do think those create opportunities for decks to do things a little bit differently and kind of force you to think about different win conditions and different paths to victory, which can be a pretty exciting puzzle to solve. I think things like maybe Subterranea are just more frustrating than kind of creating new fun moments, so I can definitely see that one. But Some of these I don't mind quite as much. I think like Lechuguila, for instance, that offers some pretty neat strategy, like trying to decide when it's right to play there. There's like Darkhawk implications. There's all kind of stuff that you have to think about with Lechuguila. So a couple of these I probably wouldn't have included in this list. And Morak too, actually, I think creates some neat little wiggle room for certain decks to perform a little better than others, and kind of understanding that balance across your deck and your opponents can be a good puzzle to solve. But some other ones, obviously, great change. I think most people hate Krakoa, for instance. I actually hate Atalan, so pretty happy to see that one on the list. So in closing, they say, that's all for now. Thanks for stopping by. This is the second to last week of our over-the-air trial period, with a full-size patch coming next week and the final May over-the-air coming on May 25th. While we're not yet set on a plan going forward, we know that we want to continue doing regular over-the-air balance updates, just at longer intervals between changes. We'll let you know when we have more to share. So yeah, pretty cool. Excited to try out Venom for sure. That's going to be really fun. We'll go back to Guardians too and see if we can make anything cool happen with Drax, although I'm not convinced this really makes him feel much better. That said, curious to hear your thoughts on all of these changes. Thanks much as always for watching, and until next time, game on.